Okay, Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to Mind Heist episode 105.
Oh yeah, establish that. There was some questions regarding 104, but I think we've established that's not coming back. The original 104.
Oh, right. Yeah. So forget 104, the fake 104. That was fake.
104.
This is real. Real news, not fake news. Yeah.
That's so good. Right. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, bro. Good. You know, I think it was yesterday. They opened up restaurants, cafes here. So that'll be different. And what else? Also, we're not really supposed to go out on weekends, so they removed the Saturday. So now it's only Sunday. You're not really supposed to go out. So they're loosening.
Fair enough.
So that's good.
They're getting people vaccinated there. Is that why?
Yeah. They said 10% of the population's been vaccinated. So it's like slower than UK, but still relatively fast, I guess.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. That's good. That's good, bro.
Bro, you know what? I was going to say this last episode, but I forgot. I want to share a theory with you.
Go for it.
A theory. Okay. I don't know what you'll think because you're not into these usually, but it's a good one.
Me.
It's a good one. Okay, so look, listen, yeah. You know, let me think, where did it start? So there's a very good documentary actually about this, which makes this seem more legit and more factual rather than being just like a theory, right? It's called The Power of Nightmares. Yes, I recommend people go listen to that, go watch that, because it's not all true. It's a bit not, I don't feel like it portrays certain Muslims in the right way, but it's pretty good, right? And the idea is that during World War I, World War II, right, there was a lot of economic growth in the Western nations, okay? A lot of growth, especially after World War II. Things were going sick, right? Things were going really well. And so the politicians, all they had to do was to keep their spot, if you like, and to gain the favor of the people, is to sell hope and sell the vision of the future. The future is going to be even better. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. Now, are you frozen or are you just not moving? Okay.
I'm just listening. Go on.
Okay. So that was their thing. What happened though, eventually was that lost steam, that lost its power. Okay. Yeah. And so they had to create an enemy. They had to start, instead of motivating and encouraging people and winning votes through hope, they started saying, using fear. Okay. So you need to vote for us because we will help you against this enemy. So the first kind of enemy they created was the communists. Okay. So that was during the Cold War days when you had the USSR on one side and then the Western world, if you like, on the other side. Okay. Capitalism versus communism. So especially in the US, very, very hard. Oh, the communists did this. If they ever wanted to like frame anyone or like, for example, I think even the Black Panthers, they're like, oh yeah, they've got this communist ideology. They always drop those words, right? And that was, and the media obviously was going mad about this whole communism thing. And that was the enemy at that time. And if you like won a little battle or gained a victory over the communists, you were the best. And like communists basically had no souls and they didn't deserve anything, right?
Yeah.
So that was the first enemy, was the communists. And that started around, the 60s, 50s, right? Now, during the Cold War still, they created yet another enemy, which was drugs. So they started the war on drugs. And this especially in the US again, where they started going hard on drugs, saying it's destroying this. Obviously, at the same time, they were swapping weapons for drugs with those gangs in Central America and all of that dodgy CIA stuff. But that was the next enemy, where it's like, we have to unite together and, we're the politicians, we're going to take you through this war on drugs. Okay. Of course, the war on drugs never really ended. The war on communism kind of ended in like 91 when the Soviet Union fell. So we got the war on drugs. It's still kind of there in the background. Then, of course, what happened? They needed another enemy. And that enemy, of course, was terrorists, right? Or what became basically Islam or Muslims or whatever, right? And that was really, really kicked off with 2001, of course. But it had started earlier than that, when there were these, I think, embassy bombings in Kenya and stuff like that, that bin Laden was involved in, etc. So they always have these enemies. And when I say create the enemy, I mean, they take something which maybe is a real threat and they just amplify it to the next level. Yeah. And what you see is every time they do this, they take away certain rights, certain levels of privacy, certain, rights, basically. So like we have with 2001, we have the Patriot Act. Patriot Act took away rights when they put it in place, and the reason that they're saying we're the freest country in the world, but we're going to put the Patriot Act in place for your own safety, because again, they're ruling by fear. They're like, if we don't do this, then it's going to be terrible. So they were able to put something like Patriot Act in place because of the fear. And then what happened? They invaded Afghanistan, they invaded Iraq. These companies that, lobby, and they have a lot of links with politicians. They made loads of money from it, blah, blah, blah. 500,000 Iraqis dead. Who knows how many dead today, up until today. Allah yarhamhum, right? So these are all the enemies, right? Now, until today, like 2020, we had we were still basically on this war on terror, right? We're still using that, but I guess after like 20 years or 19 years, it losing a bit of steam. So there was a little bit of this element of war on coronavirus in 2020. I wouldn't say it was as pushed, and it probably doesn't look like it's going to last as long, but there was still a similar element of it where the media, all of the institutions get behind it, okay? So like the international organizations like the World Health Organization, like the UN, like, philanthropists as well, like Bill Gates, like, etc. Everyone gets behind it. The media, obviously, especially, they get behind it, they push it. Okay. Now, here's my theory. Just how we had the war on terror, the war on drugs, the war on communism, the war on corona, we're about to enter a new war, which is going to be the war on climate change. Okay. Now, all of these things, actually, in theory, they sound like they make sense, right? Like we should be fighting this thing, okay, whatever it is. Yeah. I guess the consequences, though, is what we potentially should be concerned about. And we can actually see the beginnings of it with the war on terror, for example. What happened with the war on terror? When they invaded Afghanistan, for example, how many armies went to Afghanistan? Which different armies went?
Well, America, UK, I want to say New Zealand, Australia. I'm not sure how many others. There must have been some European nations in there as well.
Yeah, bro. France, Germany, UAE was there. So Turkey's there. Everyone's there. Okay. A lot of countries were involved, and they set up these agreements where we're going to share information between ourselves, and so it was very much an internationalized effort. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is basically the problem. Climate change. What's the perfect thing? Is to say climate change. We need global unity and agreement on this. Yeah. Okay. Just how with the coronavirus, I saw Bill Gates, he was saying, well, I believe in the future we're going to get better at dealing with outbreaks, because we should have an international body that goes to these hotspots where new diseases are cropping up, and they go and deal with it there and then, and we share information about how to deal with these new diseases, etc. Right? Again, the whole internationalization of it. So my theory is that this climate change thing is going to be the big thing. It's going to be the next thing. So if the war on terror lasted 20 years, this will probably last at least that long, maybe longer, because obviously it's a long battle anyway, right? With what seems to be coming in terms of climate change. But what is concerning is that the people that are going to be pushing it and running it, obviously the media always gets behind it. The media will, they're very good at causing fear and everything. But then you get these organizations like the UN, like World Health Organization, like UNICEF, like whatever, anything with UN in front of it, like the World Economic Forum. So the World Economic Forum, they talked about, I think one of the guys heavily involved in it, he put a book out called The Great Reset. Maybe you've heard of that. And I think basically what the book is talking about is now that Corona created a bit of a dip in the world economy and a chance to start afresh a little bit. And so it's like, how are we going to create a new world, a new economy, which is less going to destroy the environment, basically. And they also talk about like equality between people and blah, blah, right? But the idea is that we need to have this whole plan and way that we're going to get rid of climate change, and it must be global cooperation. And even the reason I got this idea was because Bill Gates, he did a video about his new book. His new book is like How to Avert a Climate Crisis or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So in the video, he kept mentioning international cooperation. Obviously, he's heavily involved in with the UN, with World Health Organization, with World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum, bro, I didn't realize, I just looked it up quickly. I realized what it is basically, it's what you would call a mastermind. A mastermind is just like business people coming together and sharing like the best practices and ideas, right? And just like networking. And you know, and it's usually like the top of the top because they charge a lot for you to get in. And so you pay for that access. So World Economic Forum, like you pay between 50 and 500,000 pounds a year to become part of it. And then you find all these people there, you know, networking and, you know, working together. So I guess they are on the same page and they kind of working together. So that's an organization, very influential, it seems, organization because of, I guess, the people involved in it. So we've got these organizations which don't, like, they're not us, right? They're not like the average people behind it. There are these big business people and these bureaucrats or whatever, like people from the UN, who are trying at least to implement some level of world cooperation around climate change, right? And these are the same organizations that push these gender programs and what's it called? Contraception and all this dodgy stuff that we have a big problem with, and trying to get involved in our countries, pushing things that we don't want. And obviously they have a kafir mindset, you know, they have nothing to do with the Islamic way of thinking. And so that's like level one of the problem, right? That we're looking at a plan of how to overcome climate change based on them and them like being the ones in charge of this global cooperation. And you can imagine, right, that even the EU is part of, you could say, one of these, it's not a national body, it's supranational, whatever the word is, right? So the EU also would play a role. And it's like the EU can decide to put sanctions on a country if they're quote unquote naughty, right? So could you know, other countries agree to put sanctions on countries who are not towing the line when it comes to these climate change things, whatever it is that they're going to suggest that will work, right? That's level one. Okay. Is that wacky for you or is it standard?
No, it makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, the other side of it is just, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg kind of scenario. Is like, what came first, climate change and then the plan to combat it, or was the plan to make it a center of attention the first thing? You know, that's my kind of thing.
No,
it's the same thing with COVID, because with COVID, it's like, you know, some people can go all the way to the side of, oh, COVID itself was man-made and it was to facilitate all these plans. But you know, I lean more into the point that if it was real, let's say hypothetically, okay, if you don't believe in COVID, but let's say it's real, what is the solution? Well, it kind of is the stuff that they suggest.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the tricky thing. That's the tricky thing. Yeah. Obviously, I think what we would recommend is that we don't allow ourselves to be led by these kinds of organizations towards the solution. Like we should try and work it out ourselves on a country basis or on a Muslim world basis, ideally. You know, this is ideal, of course, right? So I do believe, by the way, that stuff like climate change, stuff like communism, I think it came organically to a level and they just jump on it, right? So they might facilitate it to get a little bigger, or they might just amplify it with media, but I don't think they create it. I'm not sold on that. So that's just level one, bro. Level two would be where, again, I take this from Bill Gates' interview, where he was saying that we can't overcome the climate crisis without new technologies, okay? He said, like, basically he's fully against the idea that we just like reduce consumption and like, kind of go backwards a little bit. He's like, no, go forwards. So keep eating the same amount of meat, keep doing this, but just develop new technologies to overcome the negative sides of that consumption. Okay. So he's saying we need new tech, we need new tech. And obviously he's a big proponent of the international cooperation. So, and then you've got figures like Elon Musk, where he's like a rock star these days, right? He's like hailed as the coolest guy, the real life Iron Man, all of this stuff, right? And I feel there is this, so we're going to solve climate change through technology. Technology is the best. All hail technology, right? So I feel like that could eventually go towards this direction of a worship of technology. And, you know, to be honest with you, bro, what's his name, man? The guy that wrote Amusing Ourselves to Death, Neil Postman. And he wrote another book called Technopoly. And part of his, and this was like, when was this? I think it was like 40 years ago, he wrote this book, Technopoly. And in the book, he talks about the problem with worshipping basically technology and modernism. Okay, so that's a really good, interesting book if you want to look into this as well. So so I believe that they're going to basically push this worship of technology, which is obviously like kufr, obviously. But when I say worship, I mean worship in the sense of really like thank technology for this technology, that level of like, you know, and I think that's like the perfect scene now. So we got international cooperation. It's based on technology. You know, God didn't save us. Allah didn't save us from this climate disaster. We saved ourselves through technology, right? And people like Elon Musk, they're the best. They're the kind of the gods of this, if you like. Wa'udhu billah. And so I think that's just the perfect, sets the stage perfectly for obviously any evil actors, but especially like the Dajjal, where the Dajjal will come with his miracles, and you know that obviously Allah granted him the ability to perform, and he you know I fix the rain. You know, there is literally in the hadith it says he'll bring the rain, right?
Yeah.
And so he could bring the rain through some supernatural means, right? Through Allah giving him that, but also through technology, and then in a godless world, what is left but to worship him, you know? So that's what I've been thinking, man.
It's true. I mean, there's always those two sides of it, whether it's going to be, especially on the Dajjal perspective, whether it will be a complete sort of technological revolution or whether it will be, you know, through a complete miracle, you know, complete unexplained miracle.
Yeah.
But I don't like to get too far ahead of thinking that these are new challenges we face. I think that the psychology has always been the same since the dawn of man. Like, you know, people would have won battles with swords and swore by their sword because they thought their sword was the best in the land. You know, I mean, it was made by the best craftsman, and thank the craftsman for this sword and this blacksmith or whatever. And, you know, this is the best sword in all of Arabia and no one can defeat me. But not thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or not seeing that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that makes certain things happen. So I think the psychology has always existed. I think it's because we've got this sort of modern bias, haven't we, where we see that technology hasn't really started until post the Industrial Revolution. But technology in essence has existed forever. Like, you know, the ideas that man sort of comes up with, you know, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I always use warfare because that's the most sort of famous sort of example, but, you know, technology in warfare was something that was, I suppose it influences a lot of today's technological advancements, but like, you know, there were armies with swords fighting armies with muskets. There was, you know, armies with horses fighting armies on foot. These were all sort of advancements that, back then it was easier to see the technological advancement or conflict because we weren't so globalized. You know, you would come across an enemy and you were just like, SubhanAllah, what is this thing? They've got all these contraptions, you know what I mean? Yeah. And even so, like, trying to think of an example, like, I remember one sort of example was like those siege towers. I can't remember who had them first or whatever, but I remember an account between, you know, an army that had siege towers, an army that had never seen them before. And it was just like, all catapults and trebuchets and all of that. These were just incredible sort of things that no one could ever think of. But it is interesting because, one thing I've been looking at as well is like this discourse of like, why are we wasting money sending people up to space or going to Mars or all this other stuff? And sometimes you can fall victim to that. I say victim, it's an opinion, but sometimes you can fall into that opinion of, yeah, why are we launching so much money literally up in the sky. And I realized that there was somebody that wrote quite a nice little lengthy post about it, and they were saying how it isn't until humans create such crazy sort of goals, that to the path of those goals, they make so many discoveries that then benefit humans in general, you know.
Yeah.
They gave loads of examples, but I can't really think of them now. But like, for example, let's think of this Mars sort of mission to Mars, getting people on Mars thing. You know, the average person would think, subhanAllah, this is an absolute waste. Why are they doing this? But it isn't until, like I said, these sort of grandiose sort of extreme goals are sort of set out on, that actually, we've trial and error all these technologies to try and achieve this goal. Oh, actually, we've just discovered this, or we've just come across this. This could really benefit people here. This could really benefit people in this country. This could. But once again, ultimately, going back to your original point, it is difficult to understand. Like, I don't see the alternative other than the global sort of initiative, especially now. Like, you know, we said, oh, we should figure these things out ourselves. But if climate change really is affecting us, and I'd argue it is, based on, you know, what's been said to us and what has been shown to us, it's difficult to isolate yourself and not collaborate with others. And at the end of the day, the majority of the world is non-Muslim, you know, in that sense, as far as I'm aware of the statistics. So you're kind of left with no choice. If the world was predominantly Muslim, then you could kind of position yourself in that way. But
I think you got to look at the way previous, you know, that's why I set up the whole thing in the way I did, with the different fears that were amplified over time. And it's like, okay, you take the war on terror, for example. Yes, like we not everyone was affected like by it, okay? Like either attacked or being attacked because supposedly you have terrorists in your country. But not everyone was affected by that as much as like climate change might affect you, right? But there was this level of like international cooperation, and there's also almost like a standardization now where, you know, stuff like Interpol, again, another international organization where they must have standards for like, okay, who's a terrorist, and every country has to kind of sign up for that. So you can either go by Interpol standards, or you can say, if you're bold enough, you can say, well, no, I'm not signing up for that. I've got my own criteria. And actually these other 5 countries, they also agree with this criteria. And you can like pull people together under new banners, if you like. So it's not the fact that like you're right, bro. Like, I don't know if we can overcome it without a global, you know, way of, you know, collaboration, but it's like, who is deciding on the agenda? Who's deciding on the plan? Who's putting the policies in place?
Yeah, I suppose, but you know what? That's sometimes what is viewed as the shining light of technology as well, is that it can enable things. It's the great enabler. And not only just that, like we're seeing this whole cryptocurrency, digital currency sort of thing exploding, and that itself is like, okay, who's going to sanction me when I'm dealing in cryptocurrency? Like, you can't touch me. You know what I mean? What if the country decides, okay, that's the measure now? I mean, we've started now with companies. We've started with, you know, giant companies, I'd argue, like Square and Tesla and stuff, that's now putting their money in that kind of sort of thing. How long is it before a country says, okay, we're establishing this in our framework, and then what sanction are you going to put on them? Technology is the greatest enabler. Actually, like, you know, you could have software developers in some village in you know, Central Africa, for example, because they've just got access to the internet. And now even internet access is becoming something that is becoming enabled worldwide through that, like Starlink software, or you know, the satellite sort of internet thing that they've got going on. Like, once that, it just levels the playing field, that actually all of these countries that, you know, they swear by their might and power, and they can sort of, oh, we're going to sanction this country because it doesn't agree with us, we're going to sanction that. But suddenly their power weakens because things get unified and globalized to an extent that they can't, they're untouchable, you know?
Yeah, I'm not saying, and basically my argument would be the same argument as Neil Postman. So, and by the way, half that book just goes over my head, right? I feel I have to read it 15 times to get it. But what I did get from that book is what I would say, which is that technology is not bad, but it's like, you know, the difference between science and scientism. Yeah. That's the thing. So technology is good, obviously, if used in the right ways and blah, blah. But the worship of technology, or the use of technology for the sake of it, that is what's bad, right? So yeah, like I've got no problem with technology, and for sure we should be developing like these technologies to help with all this stuff that Bill Gates talks about, bro, and what he's investing in, right? It all sounds good, to be honest, but the problem is when people will take it that next level and say, like we hear it these days, literally, bro, you hear people say, one guy, he was saying, thank God for science, right? And he's like an atheist, right? But he's the only reason he said God in that sentence is because it sounds weird to say thank science, right? But if you were to say thank science, you are turning science into a god, right? And who are the gods of science? It's the technologists, you know. And so whether it's the person who is behind the technology, whether it's the technology itself, the problem is when you know, raise it to a level where it doesn't, you know, that does not justified, you know. So yeah, and you're right, bro. Like when whoever it was first went to battle with spears and stuff and arrows against people with gunpowder, no doubt they probably would have said it's magic, or it's something from God or from the gods or whatever they believe. No doubt, bro. When people don't understand how a technology works, they tend to call it magic or something from the divine, right? But then as they understand it, it's okay, now it makes sense, right? I think the thing we've got these days more than hundreds of years ago is that more and more the technology is so advanced that the average person doesn't understand how it works, right?
No.
So like we don't get how AI works. We don't get how blockchain works. We don't get how you can send data from Starlink down to anywhere on Earth. Like we don't get these things, right? Whereas a very sharp sword, you can kind of get it. A catapult, you can kind of get it. The average person could kind of get it.
Do you think that is the gap that needs to be fulfilled by the education system? Like the education system hasn't caught up, because all this other stuff that has existed for God knows how long, we've been taught it and it's established and we understand it. And if you were stuck in a forest, you could probably figure it out. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. But I don't know if that's realistic.
I know, but I think because like the framework of tech, like all these technological advancements have happened so quickly.
Yeah.
That I don't think the average person, like I remember like being taught a bit of coding at school, and just I can't code, but I understand the concept now. Do you understand? And that's something that the average person wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
And I think considering, we are pretty much moving into it. Well, we are an all technological society now, yet the masses haven't been educated on the basis of how this has come about.
I think that is the answer. But I don't know if it's realistic. The reason being is that when gunpowder was first being you know, like mass produced and used, etc., I think we were in more of a generalist society where people had general skills, right? Like everyone was like farming, and then on top of farming, maybe I could do woodwork or whatever, right? But now we've moved into a society where it's like you don't just have engineers, you have civil engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers. Then inside of chemical engineers, you have, I don't know, 20 different streams. And so we've got so specialized now with skills that no way is the average person going to understand what XYZ guy is doing.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to such a complexity in the technology that you can try, and it might help for, you know, to educate people, and then they would see it as for what it is, rather than it being something mysterious.
I suppose that also comes down to the people themselves. I mean, I always find myself just looking at some weird sort of 20-minute, 10-minute documentary about something like some new technology I don't understand. Like when these vaccines came out and there were so many different types, I remember just sitting there looking, having a bit of a research on what does this mean, what does that mean, instead of just, you know, taking it as it is. And the same with a lot of things, like, you know, how many TED Talks have you watched where it's just something that you've never really been interested in, and you're just like, that's, you know, I'm curious about that. What's that about? Or like a Vox documentary or a Vice documentary or whatever it is. And it's the flavor of people, what they want to be interested in, I suppose. But having some sort of general knowledge of everything that is, you know, if something comes out and you want to understand it, it's like 5G. I remember I have all this conspiracy about 5G. I was like, okay, what are the experts tell me about 5G? Like, why is it different than 4G or 3G? I just had a look, and I understand. Like, I take that information. But yeah, some people don't. Some people just have no interest, and they just, you know, go from A to B every day, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think that would equip you better, definitely, to take an interest in those things. I guess though, again, because there are so many specialities and we've gone so deep into specialities, it's hard to keep up with it, isn't it?
But the problem is, I guess, we're neither here nor there. Like all those general skills that we spoke about are no longer being passed down. I thought about this yesterday. I watched something about like planting trees. Came across something, and I was like, oh, do you know what? I'd be really interested in just if I had a plot of land, just starting a bit of agriculture. And then I thought to myself, without asking my parents, who used to be heavily involved in that sort of stuff, I wouldn't have a clue. I wouldn't really know where to start. And then it just made me think, well, actually, all of these old skills that were passed down that were just expected that people would know, we no longer have those at all. The general person doesn't. But all the skills that are most used or most necessary for today's sort of production and manufacturing also isn't taught. So we're somewhere in the middle where we're basically useless, because our skills are so what's the word? It's not self-serving, but we serve a higher sort of company or organization or whatever. Like we play such a minor part in such big organizations or big production lines or whatever, that actually that skill that we've developed is now suddenly useless when we're on our own. Like I guess
that's the downside of specializing.
We only work well if we're like a cog in a clock where the clockwork's going, as opposed to previously you didn't need a clock. You just told the time. Do you understand what I mean? Like you told the time yourself, or you knew where you were going yourself, and you picked up all of these things. Loads of things, like even simple things like a basic sort of knowledge of northeast, southwest. I remember I was listening to a fatwa regarding, I think Mufti was giving this sort of answer about the reliance on Qibla compasses, and he said, like, if you can't tell, I'm paraphrasing it, but I'm sure he said it to the words to the effect of, like, if you can't tell where the Qibla is because you lack that skill, then you're going to have to follow the app blindly. But he said, but also I recommend you always having an analog compass, And I had an analog compass before, which was also wrong. Like I remember that being completely wrong, because I don't know if it like got in touch with a magnet or some sort of metal or whatever, and it just threw it off completely. So even that, something like that, you can't necessarily rely on. So all of these basic skills, like, you think about it, like I'm quite fortunate that I live by the coast, so I kind of know where south is all the time, and based on that I can know where northeast, south is. But I remember having a big issue that when I'd be in London, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have a clue, especially with the clouds and not being able to see where the sun is. But even when you see the sun, you're not 100% sure where it's going to set. Like you could see it right above you, and you're like, is it going to go that way or that? Like you don't know, So after Dhuhr, where's the Asr going to be? I'm not sure. Lots of stuff, navigation as well. Actually, like we rely on GPS for all these things, but I was looking at photos that they.
Bro, remember those big map books?
Oh yeah, I never used them. Obviously, by the time I started navigating,
same.
it was just GPS.
Yeah,
but
I remember my parents driving with those, getting so stressed and getting lost and stuff.
So I remember I was working the other day, and someone had to come from a different city or a different town, I'd say, or a village, to come and work in this city, but they'd never worked here before. So I was driving, and I tried for once to, like, because usually I just have the sat nav on and I'm like, boom, 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 that's the sat nav, that's where I'm going. What I tried to do is look up the place on the phone and then be like, okay, that's where that is, and then just put my phone down, not set it up on the thing, and then just drive there and try. And I hadn't really done that before, but I wanted to be a little bit less reliant. And I was thinking about, it's somewhat unconnected, but I was looking at those photos of Mars that they put up because of the new rover that landed there. And I was like, subhanAllah, like you could walk the circumference of that sort of planet and not see anything, no landmarks, no sort of. And then it made me think of like being stuck in the desert, and people would have, like my ancestors, and I'm sure probably yours as well, being from North Africa, would have navigated those, the Sahara Desert and the south of the north, if you want to call it that, with the stars, and knowing which way to go and all of that sort of stuff. And I'm just like, I feel absolutely useless. Like I'm just relying on all of this stuff that could literally just be wiped out. But it's crazy, man.
Yeah.
How useless do you feel right now?
I mean, I don't blame myself for those things, because, we can only learn so many skills, and therefore we learn the skills that are relevant to our life.
I'd like to be able to learn the skills pertaining to the deen, because, the deen, we're taught in Islam about like the prayer times, or the time for fasting, the time for breaking our fast. It's not based on some number on a clock. And I realized this the other day. I was getting ready to pray Maghrib. Was it Maghrib or Asr? It was one of the prayers, right? And I had an appointment. It was like 3. So Asr on my app was like 3:05, right? So then I went to Google all the different variations of calculations, right? And they were like a minute here, a minute out, a minute difference, right? But then I had an appointment at 3:00 on the dot. So I was just like, do I pray Asr first, or do I wait 5 minutes? Anyway, this is sort of what I had in my head. And then it kind of dawned upon me that this really isn't how prayer was ordained. It wasn't done by like the minute of this particular clock. It wasn't like at this 5 past whatever. It was based on where the sun's position is. And could you really, by your eye, tell 5 minutes difference between where the sun is? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, could you really look at the sun, quite, what's the word I'm thinking of? Yeah, with the naked eye. That's at a glance with the naked eye, and be like, oh, no, still 5 more minutes. I don't think you could tell 5 minutes apart. Maybe you could tell 10 minutes apart, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah,
but 5 minutes between Asr and not. It'd be less accurate, which made me think, like, is it wrong for me to wait until, like, I'm sure you've been in a position where you're sitting down ready to pray and you're just looking at the clock and you're like, you've got literally 30 seconds left, but you'll wait those 30 seconds
as if
until it hits 1 minute, as if that's
definitely, yeah.
And I remember the Imam of the masjid once had a go at, was it us, or was I watching a lecture? Anyway, it was some Imam somewhere. I was either there or I either watched it on YouTube. But he was reprimanding the congregation by saying, you're not meant to stand up for prayer until the Imam stands up, but all of you come and stand up as soon as you see the clock. He said, the clock isn't your Imam, I'm your Imam, yani, and the salah time is not dictated by that clock, it's dictated
when
by
the Iqamah comes.
Yeah, when the Iqamah comes. So, but you'll see that, like, people will come and then it's like 10, 20 seconds left. The Imam hasn't showed up, and what ends up happening is everybody's just standing on the front row, like standing up, waiting. Like that's not where the prayer starts, is it? So these are the weird sort of different thoughts and different perspectives of looking at this whole sort of technology thing.
Yeah, I mean that made me think as well about having an adhan that you can hear. That makes a difference, isn't it? It gives you that confidence that you're following right. Because I was waiting for Maghrib. No, I was waiting for Fajr. I was waiting for Maghrib, and I was waiting to like break my fast, and like it went off on my phone, right? So I'm like, okay, any second now it's gonna go off. But the real adhan went off like 3, 4, 5 minutes later, So I waited till I heard it, because that's the real adhan, right? But imagine you're in a country where there's no adhan. Like, how do you know? How do you ever know for sure, man?
Yeah. And ultimately, the thing that some people can get really bad waswasa with this stuff, and they just get fixated on that. And to be honest, for me, I've never had that issue, but I have spoken to people that have. And I always just use the hadith that, actions are judged by intentions to sort of subside any of that sort of fixation. But, there are people that can get fixated on stuff like that. Even with wudu, like I knew a brother that he was so fixated on getting his prayer 100% right that he would just continue to redo his prayer because he wasn't sure if he did something right. Do you understand? You can have that fixation. You're like, oh, have I prayed that on time? I'm not sure. Is it, I can't see the sun, so the app is a bit funny. This prayer time, that prayer time, they're all so different. And I think that's the issue as well. I feel like without that level of ilm that can back up our deen, standard stuff that we should be know.
That's not out of our ability to learn that level of stuff, definitely.
No, not at all. But it's also, we are very lax with it all, because once again, I'm seeing how the technology's crept into it. Like, I still use although it has helped me memorize, I still use very much a dua app to do my morning and evening adhkar, right? But because I use it daily, I've now memorized it, that even when I don't have the app, like, I don't know, 10 out of the 20 adhkar I've already got memorized, so I can just use those. But yeah, it is that catch-22. Like certain memorizing Quran, for example, it's brilliant for someone who is busy all the time, like going to different places or whatever. Like, you put a surah on and you just have that on replay, and every time you're going out you have it on replay and replay. And before you know it, you've memorized at least the context or what's meant to be said, and then you can work on your tajweed accordingly. So yeah, it's fascinating to see, like, it can be a double-edged sword. It can be an absolute blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it can also be a curse if it's not used correctly, you know. It's a tool like anything that requires fiqh, in the same way that all these platforms require fiqh, all the social media requires fiqh behind it. And I think maybe that's where we need to head towards. We're talking about you know, this global imposed climate change agenda, or global imposed sort of agendas. Well, actually, we need our ulama to you know, establish the fiqh of these things. What is the fiqh of recycling? Where does that fall in our remit of deen? You know, is that something that we can accept?
What's the ruling of it? Yeah.
What is the ruling? Is it something that is encouraged? Is it something that makes sense?
Yeah.
A lot of these things, because what tends to happen is we do make our own judgments based on our own sort of ideas. Like, for example,
often based on our own, like, just culture, basically.
Yeah, or our own understanding of the deen, which may not be 100%. For example, like there's a debate, a scholarly debate regarding organ donations and stuff. And I know there's probably two sides to that coin, but your first sort of thought would be like, oh yeah, sure, why not, saving somebody's life? But there's fiqh behind that, there's context behind that. There is you can't just blindly go into something like that, even if it makes 100% sense to you. You have to do a bit of sort of research and a bit of, and because of that, you have to be cautious of everything else that you just assume is great and good. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we need to position ourselves.
Yeah.
Bi'idhnillah.
Should we do a question?
Yeah, let's go for it.
After 45 minutes.
It's all right. We'll do a couple. Have we got any emails? I don't know.
We do, but only like 3. So let's go to some of those miskeen older ones on Curious Cat.
It's very long. I don't know if these are questions or. I think this person is just suggesting all these different people to try and get on the podcast.
Okay.
Maybe. Okay. I'll have to. Do you know what? I need to read these when we're not sort of there, and then because some of them I could just reply to here instead of doing it on the pod. Okay. Let's do this one because it might be critical towards us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you brothers are doing well. I have been a listener on your podcast for some time now. I've always liked how you guys don't go with the mainstream take on things. However, with your last episode, I was slightly disappointed with your comments on the Khabib situation. So that's the one we must have done on like MMA or Khabib specifically and stuff.
Yeah.
While I agree that many of these successful hijabi women on YouTube and other platforms are on promoting Islam, doesn't make sense, or are known for their religieux. Well, it's just a bunch of typos.
Regular? Okay.
Just says religieux, they commitment. I don't know. That does not excuse what Khabib is doing. If someone is coming with something haram, man or woman, we will not accept it from them. There's a set path in the religion generally, and in da'wah specifically. It doesn't matter how many sisters are galvanized by makeup tutorials that begin with mashallah and end inshallah. And the same goes for Khabib. And as one person put it, Allah and his messenger are not in need of haram. I do not want to prolong this, so I will attach the following hadith, barakallahu feekum, on the authority of the mother of the faithful Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, who said, the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, he who innovates something in this matter of ours, Islam, that is not of it, will have it rejected by Allah. That's from Bukhari and Muslim. In one version of by Muslim, it reads, he who does not act with which we have not commanded will have it rejected by Allah. Cool. That's the end of that one.
That was episode 94.
I think ultimately what I want to say, I don't know if I said it before, but what I was saying is, like, I was trying to draw a comparison between, for example, here they've mentioned makeup tutorials by Muslim women, right? In that particular action, I don't support them. But if that very sister was then interviewed or gave some sort of comment or something where she didn't shy
someone
from
in the face.
No, not just that. But like, if someone, let's say hypothetically, let's say Bint Abdullah, right? Bint Abdullah does makeup tutorials or whatever. Okay, Khalli Wali. But then one day she gets interviewed by BBC about it, and then the reporter says something derogatory about Islam, you know, and then she just stands up for Islam in that particular moment and says, no, that's not the case. This is what Islam teaches. This is what Islam's about. And then you can't not applaud them for that, just because. And then ultimately, I think what we were saying is, we're not celebrating his prowess in the sport or his ability. We're not celebrating that. We are, and just because he does that doesn't mean he's not Muslim anymore. I think that's ultimately what we're saying. What we're saying is that him having the ability to be on that platform, whether he got there through haram or got there through halal, but to be in a situation where the mic and the camera is on him and to firmly defend Islam or to be proud of Islam, or that's what I think we applaud, because what we're saying is that there's millions and millions of Muslims that are doing haram, right? And then they're also faced with those situations and those circumstances, and they still don't defend Islam, or they demean Islam, or they don't represent Islam in the right light. Do you understand? I think that's my perspective.
That's exactly what we were saying, man.
I'm not saying, oh, go him. He's, you know, the pen has been lifted off him for the sins that he may be committing. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm saying, may Allah reward him for the good he's doing in this particular avenue, in this particular place. You know?
I think everything we said in that episode was enough to explain what we think. And if you still disagree, that's fine. Like, it's funny how they said, you know, I like your non-mainstream opinion, but I was disappointed. It's like, often by having non-mainstream opinions, you're going to disappoint people, I think. So it's cool. But one thing I would say is those hadith he's referring to, that's about bid'ah, and bid'ah refers to, is applicable to worship. So I don't know if that really applies here.
Yeah, this is within the religion, isn't it? Innovating something within the religion. And I'd argue that, Wallahu a'lam, but I'd argue that the sport isn't, what he does in the sport isn't something to do with religion. The issue I have, though, is that this mentality is a slippery slope to on the extreme end of that mentality. The far end of that mentality is like a Khariji sort of extremist mentality of throwing people off the deen.
Yeah, it's like you're perfect or you're a kafir.
And that's the issue. Like, we're not saying he's perfect. In fact, but we're also not saying that just because he's done this haram, just like we all do haram, doesn't mean that we have no right and can't be applauded for doing good or khair and saying a good word. You know? Because if that was the case, then we shouldn't be doing this podcast. We shouldn't be speaking to anybody. We shouldn't be giving any da'wah. We shouldn't be doing, you know, when we're met with an opportunity to give da'wah, we should be silent. You know, the worst Muslim that could possibly walk this earth, right? If, and I'm not talking about a mushrik, I'm talking about a Muslim, but he sins openly and he's, you know, maybe drinks alcohol, whatever it is, all this other stuff. The mic is put to him, or somebody comes to him and asks him about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if he can answer that accordingly and correctly and promotes Islam, then he'll be rewarded for it. We can't take that right away from him. You know?
Like imagine, imagine like a random news reporter, you know, going around interviewing random people, and there's like this drunk Muslim guy, and he just goes on camera drunk, and he's like, La ilaha illallah, like that's good. Like that's something that makes the Muslims happy, you know.
I've realized a lot of people that are very critical like this don't live or they're not familiar with the Muslim world at all. Because look, you could watch, you know, Algerian TV. I could watch Tunisian TV. Akhi. Everybody's Muslim, right? But they're all open. You know, a lot of them are open sinners or open this or open that, and they're not really too. But
especially on TV,
especially on TV, and that's well known. That is well known. The Muslim world isn't all, you know, salat and ibadah. It isn't. We know that because we see it. You know, in fact, you're often considered strange being there. Like myself, yourself, I'm sure we're considered as strangers. What about for trying to practice the deen openly or being vocal or whatever to the majority, right? But however, you get a TV presenter that suddenly mentions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or suddenly starts something with Bismillah, you have to applaud him for it, because that's a drop in the ocean, of course. But it's also a right that you can't take away from him. I've never once looked at all these TV personalities, for example, in the Muslim world and said they are not Muslim. I can't do that. And because of that, when it's Ramadan and they say, you know, Sahaf Turkum, and they talk about Ramadan and they mention Allah's name, of course I'm going to be like, that was a good thing he said there. May Allah reward him. May Allah guide him. May Allah bring him closer. So that's all we're doing. But because this is a Western, you know, he's a bit of a Western phenomenon. He exists in the Western hemisphere, in the non-Muslim hemisphere. We are extra critical of those Muslims that are there, as if the Muslim world is all practicing and it's all perfect. And do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, it's like we're judging we go into extreme judgments of Muslims here, not realizing that the majority of Muslims don't practice, well, the ones that we see on the media aren't practicing, and they're not openly, you know, mentioning Allah's name or praying or whatever it is. So I don't want to get into that extremist bubble and that slippery slope, because he has a right. He has rights that he can attain good deeds, and may Allah guide him. And that's what we pray for, you know. Anyway, bit of a rant now. I didn't mean to go on a rant, but it is what it is. No, I think it just has to be said. I think it's dangerous. It's dangerous to. It's almost banning people from praise. Oh, mashallah, big screams there. Right.
Surprise.
We go to the next one. This was from the 4th of December. We're getting closer to the present day.
Mashallah.
It says, I just want to say thank you for your commitment to the podcast. I've listened and have always benefited. May Allah reward you both. I have never decided to connect until now, but I just wanted to show my gratitude from the bottom of my heart. Jazakallah khair. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I'll reply later. How about that?
Thank you. And we need the du'as more than anything, innit? So.
Definitely. These are big ones. These are going to be big topics, and I haven't got too much time. And then there was like a blitz of just random ones. Let's go with, what's the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard anyone say out loud? And these aren't, I thought these were automated, but they all came on the same day. So I think someone just wanted to, what's the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard anyone say out loud? Oh, it's going to be a big moment of silence now while I think of that. I don't know. Can't think of anything. It sounds like you're thinking of something already.
Bro, I'm struggling, yeah, but something came to mind. But I wouldn't say it's the most ridiculous thing. But
go on.
This just came to mind for some reason. Yeah, there's this clip going around years ago, and it was this guy. So this is when, you know, around the time when Morsi was president of Egypt, and then Sisi was kind of on his way to get rid of him, etc. Yeah. So this guy, like pro Sisi guy, he was on TV, and he was just Egyptian, bro, like so emotional, and he's like Morsi Magnoon Basulta. He's gone nuts from the power that he's got. Yeah. Magnoon Basulta. And then the host is like trying to like question him and like keep things a bit calm, and he's just getting frustrated, and he's like this, whatever the number they made up, there's 3 million protesting in the streets against him, 3 million. And then she's like, okay. And then he's like it's haram. I just started saying haram. He started coughing, bro.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, he's coughing and he can't breathe, and she's like, calm down. She's like, I'm worried for you, and he calm yourself down, and he can't breathe, and he's still saying haram. Like, I don't know why he's saying it's haram. Like, he just wanted to like get that word in there. So that just something came to mind. It's not the most ridiculous, but it's funny anyway.
I want to find it, bro. But I'm not going to be able to find it. I remember that. He almost had a heart attack. He was so angry.
Yeah,
well, that's the answer to that question for now. So we can think of something else next episode. No. Can I squeeze out one more? Let's have a look. That's it, kind of, you know. Everything else is a bit longer. When was the last time you immediately regretted something you said?
Not enough.
Yeah, not enough. I think I regret most times I speak.
I
can't deal with a lot of the times I'm like, it's just, I should have just stayed quiet. But I've learned that a lot. Anyway. I think I'm a lot less reactive. I'm a lot less reactive than I was before. Because I've learned that at work as well, because you will have colleagues with quite the ego dealing with the public, and the public, I say the public, but certain members of the public will want to goad a reaction out of you, you know. I went to court 2 days ago I was the victim of a racially aggravated public order offense where essentially this guy was just absolutely racist towards me, whatever. Fancy way of saying it. But what did he do? It was the last year that this happened.
Wow.
It was about a year ago, so he probably just got to court now. But he essentially, first thing he did was ask me if I was British, and then how long I've been in Britain for, and all this other stuff, which fair enough. And then I'm the only right he has upon me is to take my name or take my sort of details, essentially, if he ever wanted to make a complaint. So that's what I gave him. Eventually I was like, you know what? I know exactly what kind of person you are. You're having this is this, and that's it. You're not getting any more out of me. And everything was recorded, right? So, those cameras and everything was recorded. So I remember I said to the judge, after I gave him my details, I purposefully made it sort of a mission in my mind not to say anything else to him, because I knew that all he wanted was a reaction out of me, and I wasn't going to give it to him. So quite fortunately, the entire conversation, I say conversation, it was one-sided, was all on camera. And because I didn't say anything to him, it was 100% clear that this was, what's the word? It was uninitiated by me. It wasn't like a reaction to anything I'd done or said or whatever to him. So essentially he was found guilty, and fair play. I wonder if I get any compensation. I don't know. But that's what interested me. It was like, that could have easily been, and for anyone else, it could have easily been a situation where it would have been just a back and forth. Someone loses their temper, and
it wouldn't it wouldn't be so obvious that you didn't do anything right.
Yeah, and ultimately, a lot of it can be ego that gets in the way of being able to sort of sit tight in those situations. What's helpful is that in that circumstance, you've got a camera recording the interaction, so everything that you want some recompense, then you're going to get it bi'idhnillah. But also something that has always kept me going is that I don't see, as we all do, we don't see this as the final courtroom we're going to meet in this life. The courtroom that we'll be dealing with is the one, in the akhirah. And what I tell myself internally is that I will memorize your face, and I will memorize your face. Anyone that wronged me, I will memorize your face. I won't get my right in this life. I don't need to. If I get it, I get it. That is what it is. If I get it in this life, fair play. I'm not going to chase it in this life, however, but I will remember your face for Yawm al-Qiyamah bi'idhnillah. And that can really appease people and then keep them patient, increase their patience. For the non-Muslim who has no concept of the akhirah, it is very difficult for them not to get their rights in this life. And they can lose, themselves chasing their rights in this life, chasing.
Reminds me of that Nation of Islam thing we were talking about last episode.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, there's going to be situations and circumstances where if you don't chase your rights in this life, then you're going to be suffering a lot for the rest of your life. It could be anything,
Well, you got to do it for the sake of others. Like, they oppressed me. If I don't stop them, they'll oppress others. So
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good perspective to have, and that is the only reason why I do encourage Muslims to sort of not let people get away with things in that sense. Like, for example, you can have circumstances where you're either racially abused or you're spat on or you're assaulted or whatever it is because you're Muslim, because of your faith, right? And you can have the perspective that I had where it's like, I'm not going to do anything. Well, I didn't say I'm not going to do anything about this. No, I did do something about it, but I didn't react to appease my ego in that moment. I was patient, and I made sure that it was all recorded and I can establish it, etc. But I do encourage Muslims to sort of take advantage of the means that are available to deal with these people, right? And to deal with those people that to commit crimes against you or that disgrace you or whatever within reason. Because even if you can handle it and you can be patient, maybe Khala so and so and Jidda so and so can't deal with that, and that will ruin them. That would really damage them. And maybe when somebody gets used to being able to to walk all over and trample over Muslims, then they get empowered to go further and do more, right? And you've got to nip it in the bud with whatever you can do and whatever's available to you. It's like what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, to paraphrase, regarding if you see a munkar, then you change it with your hand, and if you can't, then you speak out against it, and if you can't, then you hate it in your heart. Kama qal. So you've got to do something, but also it has to be for the sake of Allah, and I think that's what ultimately I'm trying to say. It's not for your own ego or your own self. It's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sake of his deen, and the sake of the honors of the Muslims that, you know,
imagine you weren't too bothered by something, but just because it was a munkar and you wanted to follow that hadith, you tried to pursue it to stop it, you know?
Yes,
That's
exactly,
quite a strong intention. So what kind of punishment would this guy get?
I don't know. I didn't sit around.
Like a fine or like community service?
It was like a live sort of court thing. It's like they do it over webcam now, which is a lot easier. But it depends on their history. It depends on their record previously. Right. It could be that he has a history of doing this and a fine will not suffice. Right. You know, it could be all sorts of stuff. So
might get caned, right?
Oh, well, not in this country. But you know, it's interesting you say that, because a similar thing happened with a Libyan guy who was doing it to me. And I'm not going to repeat what he said on this podcast because I think it's horrendous. And it was, you know, he was insulting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, insulting the deen in ways that you couldn't get away with in Libya. And that was basically my thing. It was like, you could not get away with this. Like, you are very lucky that I'm here dealing with you under the you know, this jurisdiction and this law, because if you were anywhere else, I don't think you would survive the rest of the night, like with the stuff that he was saying, you know. Wow. But likewise, you know, that was more hurtful because it was like, you know, this is one of our, you know, one of my people, so to speak. You know, he had a Muslim name. It was from our sort of neck of the woods. You know, the accent was very much one that I understood and recognized. And yeah, once again, it's like, subhanAllah, that's a Muslim. Well, Allah knows best. Allah knows best what's in their heart, and if they're Muslim or not. I'm not going to make that judgment there and then. But by the things they were saying, I don't really think so. But also, the things they were saying aren't things that I've never heard of in the Muslim world. You know, some people can say things in the Muslim world that are isolated. If you were to write that sentence out and you were to present it to an English Muslim, you would think, "Oh, that's kufr." Like, who's saying that, right? But some people in the Muslim world will just say that whenever they're angry or say things like that. Do you understand? They'll say the most awful things in reaction to, you know, a negative event or whatever. Someone cuts them up in the road, like a taxi driver gets cut up in the road, and he will start, you know, swearing and cursing to the extent that the sentence on its own, isolated, is a statement of kufr, no doubt. But
what's the example of that? Because I can't think of any.
Like, you can't think of one. Okay, let me think.
Because I like, for example, I know in Egypt, for example, a lot of people, they say, like, they swear by the prophet, right?
Okay, some people will say, like, I'm going to say it, but some people will say Nal din Rabbuk. They'll say that all the time.
Okay, yes.
So yeah, so that's essentially for the English guys, English listeners, or the boys who don't speak Arabic. It translates to like a curse on the religion of your God. Right, so it's like a two-way kufr there. You've separated the fact that their God isn't your God, but you're also cursing the religion of them as if it's not your religion either. You know, so it's like saying, it's like you're speaking to someone who's completely kafir, right? You know, let's say hypothetically, some pagan stabbed you in the back. You said that to them. So the curse the religion of your God, fair play, like whatever. But you're in a Muslim country, surrounded by Muslims, and a Muslim cuts you up in traffic and you scream that out of the window. Like, what does that mean? You know, and people say that all the time, stuff like that, and stuff worse than that, and stuff less, but all around that sort of language. So I think that's pretty much what he said to me, more or less what he said to me. I wasn't having it. I was like, no, not having that. Even though, because he's clearly not born and bred in the UK, even though that could just be from his sort of North African Libyan side, that's where that's coming out. I can't say whether he meant it or not. But to me, not growing up in those countries, I'm like, no, objectively, that's a statement of kufr. I'm not dealing with that. You know. So anyway, that's basically. And I don't know if
it's really good, bro. When you can, sometimes if you can just stay calm for the first few seconds of a situation like that, it really tastes good, bro. The revenge. I remember, this made me laugh so much. I was once in the UK in a smaller kind of village, right, where, you know, not many Muslims at all. And I was with my mom and dad and this and that. And obviously we look Muslim or whatever. So this guy drove past us and they opened the windows and they're shouting something else. I can't remember if we could hear what they were saying or whatever. So I don't know, but probably it was to do with the fact we're Muslim. I don't know. So what does my dad do as a response? he just looked the guy straight at the guy, and he's like that. Nice one. Thumbs up. You can imagine how infuriating that is.
That's the thing,
Like, yeah, you're cool, mate. Nice one.
Yeah. He wants a reaction, but they won't get it.
Yeah.
No, alhamdulillah. May Allah safeguard the Muslims, Aki, and give them the strength and the aql to make the right decisions in circumstances like that, because it can be difficult. Some people, unfortunately, some people can get very hot-headed, do something excessive, and land themselves in trouble, which isn't what we want. But Allah knows best. Allah knows best. Is that a necessary sacrifice for the sake of Allah? Land yourself in prison or something. Allah knows best.
Yeah.
But Allah knows best. I think that's all I can say. I think we'll end it here.
Inshallah. So remember, you can go to mindhousepodcast.com to ask us questions, comments, all of this stuff. We will, inshallah, get to it as soon as we can. And reminder that the video version of these podcasts, they're on a different YouTube channel, on the Mind Heist channel now, and the link for that is just in the description thing of the audio thing. So, and actually maybe we should put a link to the YouTube channel on that page, on that mindhousepodcast.com page, inshallah. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, shadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.